finally, a bit of sanity in the midst of all the January 6th insurrection talk that is out there. The Democrats have made massive blunders in this election cycle already. We know this. There's no question about it based on the polling, based on the early voting that we're seeing in a number of states. They went all in on abortion, which was a huge mistake in a number of places because it was the wrong focus. Yeah, sure, maybe it plays well in New York. Maybe it plays well in some of the places that they are pushing this as a talking point. But it doesn't actually motivate people to vote who wouldn't already be voting for them. But the even bigger and more just jaw-dropping mistake, the blunder that they made on the focus on January 6th here and the threat to democracy, they clearly convinced the Democrat base that Jan 6th, the same way they convinced the Democrat base, wear 2 masks, get 5 shots, stay home unless you have a social justice protest and then, in response to the George Floyd killing, the same way they convinced people of all of that, they managed to convince their own base through the Democrat apparatus and its echo chamber that threats to democracy were the most important issue in the Democratic election we are having here, which was just sheer lunacy. I mean, this was just crazy all along, Clay. And this is a moment here. We have this MSNBC, I guess she's a reporter now, whatever, someone from MSNBC, not a name that people are going to be familiar with, who is sitting down with Pittsburgh voters, okay, with a bunch of voters in Pittsburgh. Oh, Elise Jordan from MSNBC.
Yes.
Yeah, no one's heard of her.
They have now.
What?
They have heard of her now.
Well, they have now. Yes. Well, it's funny because
here.
she was not ready for this one, and also just seems you could see in her face like, wait, like, what do you mean you don't think January 6th is the big important thing? Like, you could see there's just this total disconnect. These Pittsburgh voters, and it's just like one after another. This is MSNBC got them together. This is like the MSNBC focus group. Let's start with this one. Play 8.
Doug Mastriano was at the insurrection, and he was photographed breaching one of the restricted areas. Is that okay?
Which area? Because I saw a video where Capitol officers were taking away barriers and unlocking doors. So, I mean,
they opened the gates.
So it shouldn't be disqualifying for an elected official if they participated in January 6th?
He didn't strike anybody. He didn't hurt anybody.
And the only one that died was a protester there, not a Capitol police
unarmed
officer.
Female veteran. Was
That's
shot
the
by
only one that
police.
died.
That's the only one who died.
A police officer did die.
No, it was a
heart
stroke.
attack.
That's not on site.
Caused by that. That's because
Right.
he shouldn't have been a police officer.
I mean, did we secretly have a bunch of our listeners sneak into this MS? Because it sounds like our people right there, because they know what time it is.
I got to say, Buck, I love this on so many different levels because, having worked in media, there's a lot of people in our industry that don't do any homework, right?
Oh, yeah.
They can't be bothered to even read the basic articles. They even look at the headlines. They quiz on it. I mean, maybe
it's all
this is
hairspray,
just,
no homework, Clay. We know it.
That's exactly right. And what's embarrassing, Buck, is many of these people have big staffs, right? So they don't even have to do the research themselves. They just have to employ people who can do the research well for them. And it's just so embarrassing to not have the basic knowledge of a story that you are going to sit down and quiz these people on and have them come back at you with the actual facts. This is your job, right? These people are just citizens. Credit to them for doing the hard work to be able to be informed on an issue like this when there's so much misinformation out there floating around. But the reporter should be far better informed than the people she's questioning. And I'll just say this, Buck. This reminds me, when you're a lawyer, you need to know almost the answer to every question that you're asking. You need to be so well prepared that you know the facts of a case upside, downside, every different direction better than the people you're quizzing, because you got to make sense of it for a jury or for a court, whoever's reviewing all these facts. This was embarrassing for MSNBC. I'm actually stunned, Buck, that they aired this, because maybe they didn't realize how bad it made them look because there's so much in their echo chamber that they thought that these witnesses, this town hall, this group, the forum that they had put together was misinformed and they were going to look so much smarter than they did. But it just gets worse. I mean, there are clips that continue of them correcting this reporter.
The highly mediocre movie from 1998, A Civil Action. Do you remember this one? It's a John Travolta lawyer movie. There is, I think it is Robert Duvall is lecturing his law school class, and they're doing cut-ins to the trial, and he says something like, never ask a question you don't know the answer to, and they ask a guy on the stand, like, well, sir, why did you do that? And he goes on this, tirade that's really bad for the good guy side in the movie, which, of course, corporations, evil, the environment, all that stuff. But Clay, this continues. Over at MSNBC, they asked some questions they didn't know they didn't know how would be answered, at least how they'd be answered by this audience. A very stunned Elise Jordan, still like, yeah, like I just wait, but like the insurrection, like January 6th, like guys, like democracy under threat, and all these people, men and women, are like, nah, lady, that's not really how this goes. Oh, by the way, we have Doug Mastriano joining us on Friday, so we can ask him about this as well. Play clip 9.
What do you make, though, overall of January 6th? I mean, watching that footage, it was pretty disturbing. I mean, there were people throwing excrement at the walls, and it was it's the Capitol.
It looked a lot like Antifa's actions.
Yeah, it looked a lot, except on a much smaller scale. It looked the same as the Black Lives Matter riots.
That's what I saw, the similarities to be.
Minneapolis burns, Kenosha burns.
But so it's okay just because one side that you disagree with?
I'm saying Antifa infiltrated.
It's good for one, it's good for the other.
Anybody who harmed anybody who caused property destruction, that needs to be dealt with.
Yeah,
but if you're there making
side.
your voice heard at the people's house, no less, that's, again, it's a fundamental constitutional right of an American citizen. And people should not be being held political prisoner because of it.
For misdemeanors. That's East Germany.
That's East Germany.
Tactics.
Yeah, that's what's scary.
I mean, I don't know if they're listeners to this show. They should be. They sound like they're listeners to this show because they're totally on point here. And I mean, one of my favorite comments among many there. Notice how they're all good too. Like they're just throwing in one thing after another. MSNBC randomly stumbled upon normal Americans. Like this is people that aren't announcing their pronouns and, think that Keith Olbermann is really smart. And, like they found normal people who view these things through the lens of rationality. And I thought it was particularly interesting when he says, yeah, it's like Black Lives Matter riots, except on a much smaller scale.
Totally true. And the way that the responses register, I mean, you saw Ted Cruz kind of cut through this with The View on Monday when Whoopi Goldberg was like, well, when we lose, we don't riot. Because that's something that Democrats say, right? I mean, that's an argument you've probably heard if you have somebody in your friend circle or somebody in your family who is talking about January 6th. They say, well, we're not happy when we lose. And I would just point out, wait a minute, all those plywood, all those protected windows that were set up on the night of the election, that wasn't in case Joe Biden won, right? All of the lockdowns of city streets and everything else was in the event that Trump had been announced the winner that night. And for months, we dealt with, and it's become a joke, certainly, the mostly peaceful protests that terrorized the country for the entire summer of 2020, Buck. And it's as if that isn't even allowed to be brought up. I think that's starting to change, however, because as we talked about last week, support for BLM overall is cratering and tanking as crime increases, and even people who were maybe initial supporters of BLM are taking a step back and say, wait a minute, we've completely taken away the police officer's ability to defend us. And I saw something last night that stunned me, Buck. I was watching Monday Night Football. There was a game between the Patriots and the Bears, and as they were going to commercial break on Monday Night Football, do you know what they did? They honored two police officers on ESPN's broadcast who had been killed in Bristol, Connecticut. And I couldn't believe that they were actually referencing it. Also, the New England Patriots, I believe, had their families on the field before the game for years. The NFL turned its back on law enforcement, and suddenly the winds of political discourse have shifted. And even ESPN last night during Monday Night Football was saying we want to make sure we honor these two brave police officers who gave their lives.
But do you think, and this is what I would put out to the voters as well right now, Clay, is this a change of heart or is this a tactic? Because it seems to me that when Kathy Hochul, for example, governor of New York, all of a sudden goes, oh yeah, we'll put more cops on the subway. Really? 2 weeks before Election Day, you've decided, you know what, we're actually going to go with this. More cops is probably going to make people safer in the place that they're scared of thing. Yeah. Is it because they realize that they were wrong? I mean, the analogy I use is, this is like the classic thing in the movies, the TV show, when the mean boyfriend or husband, has been nasty, and finally his wife or girlfriend is bags packed at the door. And he goes, oh, I'll change, baby, I'll never do it again, and I'll treat you better and all this stuff. Is he really going to change, or does he just not want you to leave this one time because you're about to leave? I think that's what you're seeing with voters. I don't think the Democrats have changed one darn bit. I think they still believe in this lunacy. I just think they realize they're about to get some consequences.
I think it's certainly electoral politics related. I also think, Buck, and this is just sad, I think a huge percentage of our politicians just follow whichever direction the crowds are going. They aren't actual leaders. They're so desperate to stay in office that they throw up their finger, see which way the wind is blowing, and then try to follow that herd. And I do think that a lot of independent voters in particular are fed up with crime, and they're looking for who to blame. And I think a lot of people are saying Democrats and BLM are to blame. And so that's why I think you're seeing Democrats try to rush away from BLM. Now, the question you're asking, which is a good one, and I think it's likely to be true, is by 2024, I suspect we'll have riots going on in cities again. I suspect that they're, just like we did in 2016, just like we did in 2020, Democrats seem to be able to mobilize BLM to riot and loot and argue that America's an awful place conveniently every 4-year presidential cycle as an effort, I really think it is unfortunate, as an effort to try to mobilize black voters to support them by saying, look how awful the country is otherwise. I do think, however, a lot of black voters are getting wise to this, and I'm curious whether it works in 24, which is a big question kind of floating around. I mean,
people should also remember the original BLM movement started under the Obama administration.
Yeah, 16 in Ferguson.
It was I think it was 20. Was it? When did Mike Brown it was 2014.
Was it 14? I thought 16 was when Ferguson was burning, and it really kind of took off. The 14 might have been Trayvon Martin. Did it start with Trayvon Martin and then accelerate with Ferguson?
No, Michael Brown was killed by police in Ferguson, Missouri in August of 2014.
But didn't they start the protest? The protest didn't really take off in earnest until 2016.
Oh, when did the actual protest
Ferguson,
get going?
That's I thought that was the summer of 16.
Yeah, it's here. It says August of 2014 to August of 2015, but that's just a first pass on Google. I'll have to go and see when. Basically, what we're referring to here is when were buildings burning in the background,
yes.
And CNN was like, it was mostly peaceful.
Yes, when was that exactly going on? Obama, you're right. Obama was in office. I thought that was in the 16 run-up to the presidential election. Maybe it was the primary season.
Yeah, no, that was before. And I just think that you're going to see this cyclical mobilization of the destructive Democrat left for political purposes again. I don't know if they're going to do it by 2024. Because they may the Democrats may realize the crime issue was such a vulnerability that, all these Soros-backed organizations and community organizers, they may try a different tactic going. But we'll see, man. It's a long ways away. And we got to see how this election shakes out first.
No doubt. And we also got to continue to fight these battles. We got some more great audio for you, by the way, as we go forward of Democrats just absolutely in a panic. BLM, according to Ali, by the way, started in 2013. But it definitely is ratcheted up every 4-year election cycle. And, Buck, I think you're asking a really good question, which is how much of this come-to-Jesus moment, so to speak, is actually going to last versus how much are we going to see by 2024? Oh, it's time to hit the BLM arguments all over again to try to mobilize Democrat turnout. I think it's a fascinating question. One of the things that I think all of you have recognized, and that MSNBC clip was so illustrative, is that we know better what the left wing in this country is saying than they have any idea what we're saying. And actually, as a group, I think we are far better informed on both sides of many of these issues. And that's why when I see clips like this, listen to MSNBC's Jason Johnson, what he's saying about all of you. Let's be quick here.
You have one side, which is the majority of the American people, who just want to go to work, eat dinner, stay safe, pay less in gas prices, and know that they have their same medical rights that they woke up with earlier this year. And then you have another group of people who are essentially fascists, and they want an authoritarian government. We have to stop pretending that we're talking about friends and neighbors. You're talking about people who want to basically imprison women in their bodies and make them completely subjective to men. You're talking about people who don't think black people should have a right to do anything but play sports. You're talking about a group of people who on a regular basis attack everybody of a different religion.
I mean, MSNBC is insane, Clay. Like, it's actually
That's crazy,
it's
right?
crazy. The channel's just crazy.